Welcome to Embody the Evolution Podcast, a podcast to explore conversations on how we can embody the evolution of who we need to become so that we can live sustainably in co-creation and in connected spirituality.
Hi, I'm Kat. I like to dance like a sunflower.
And I'm Leslie. I like riding my bike and feeling the wind in my hair.
Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to another episode of Embody the Evolution. In this episode, we're speaking with Matt Lansadel, transformative life coach, empathic healer, and spiritual teacher who uses his power as a highly sensitive person to help others transform their own relationship with themselves and live authentically.
Yeah, so I wanted to introduce you, Matt, and just honor the work that you've done in your coaching practice. And I love learning more about you in your book, Be the Space. Yeah. And, your time as a life coach and empathic healer, I've known you firsthand in that realm and as a spiritual teacher, because you've taught me a little bit. And working in Calgary, Canada, and seeing most of your clients remotely. Is that right? You're kind of working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've learned a little bit about how you heal shame and trauma, both in your own experience in this book, even from a young age, kind of going back and looking at your whole journey that you shared so vulnerably. So thank you. And then also just how your coaching practices around authenticity and enjoying those connections in your life, and that you really focus on highly sensitive people. And you introducing me to that phrase and the quizzes around that, and really the deep research around it, and how empathics and gay men develop a stronger sense of self-worth. So I'm so excited you're here to share about these topics. And
thanks for having me. I'm excited to see what we co-create here. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and to kick it off, I had noted one part of your book that I was so enjoying, because honestly, I looked through it a bunch last night, and I just want to go to this one page that you said, grown men don't cry, do cry.
Yeah.
And I was like so impressed with what you were saying here around on this journey of coming home to yourself, that one of the most pivotal can be when you approach the entrance to your inner body, and how much you were talking about releasing the emotions, and that residue can be so cathartic, you said, and life-changing, and how you were expressing about crying. And so I'm curious on your journey, what called you to really speaking to gay men, speaking to the more empathic nature of your experience around just releasing the energy and being able to cry as a man, as a gay man.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, I talk in the book about the entrance to the inner body. Like we have an outer body, which is our physical shell, but our inner body is like our emotional and our energetic body. And I think as a young boy and as young boys, we are conditioned very early on to disconnect from our inner body and to not have emotions and to push them down. And we see emotions as weak. And I just think I bought into that. I was totally swindled by the patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, this dominator system that tells men to be a certain way and tells women to be a certain way. And I think I fully bought in. And I got to a point in my life where I just realized that I was really disconnected from myself. And I'm a firm believer that our emotions, they're like our messengers towards our authenticity. And if we're not connected to our emotions, we literally don't have access to this kind of compass that's pointing us in the direction of our authenticity, of our meaning, of our purpose. And I was just feeling lost, and I was feeling disconnected from myself. And I think that was right before I left to move to Asia. I moved to Southeast Asia for a year, and that's when I wrote that book. I wrote it on my iPhone, actually, and I just emailed every chapter to myself and then compiled it and then self-published it. But So, and then when I was over there, I had a lot of cathartic experiences where I was just connecting back into my body, and I had to cry out tears that I had held in for decades, really, since I was a little kid. And then that's when I really kind of met this more sensitive part of myself and realized that I'm more highly sensitive as a man. And then my healing journey really began. I thought I was on my healing journey for 10 years before that, but really I was intellectualizing a lot of my healing and I wasn't actually embodying it. And I think when I started to connect with my emotional body is when my healing really truly began. And that's only been 3 years now. So I feel very fresh and new back into being a man who's feeling his feelings again. It's still quite new to me. So I'm navigating that as I go. So.
Yeah. And how humbling that you can say you've put in all this effort and it's not actually being effective until you start to embody it with your emotions. Thank you for that humility and honoring your journey, because you did put in so much effort and you did get to this place where you were, teaching yourself, teaching others through your book at the same time while you were opening to these emotions, opening to that healing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because I do, at that time I was doing counseling. So that's my background, is in counseling, and I was doing addiction work, and I did that for about 10 years. And looking at my work now and what I offer now, and being embodied, and connected to my emotions, my counseling and coaching is just so much more potent, and it has a layer of depth to it. Before, I was still doing great work, but I was very much I was not psychosomatic, right? I was very much up in my brain and intellectualizing and chewing on concepts with clients and stuff, which it can be really therapeutic. But when you enter the realms of trauma healing and you want to do that deeper work, you need to be embodied as a practitioner who's walking people through that journey. You can't fake it. You can't fake that work, because the client needs to feel the resonance of an embodied being in order for them to be able to replicate that transformation. So I just found that I could only take my clients so far before I had become embodied myself. And now that I'm embodied, I'm able to take my clients to places that I never even could have imagined before, right? Which is amazing.
Yeah. Does it seem like an infinite potential, or is it?
It does. Yeah, it does, very much so. And where I learned that aspect of things is probably in the authentic relating, is just surrender, let go, right? And just fully just allow the moment to inform you of your potential. And really it's infinite when you're in the moment, because it's any expression can come forward and any expression can come outward. And I just think that that's really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love how you said that, because in your book, you talk about the outer and inner body. And I'm really curious Leslie's input on this too, because as I was reading about it, I was really curious about it. And we talk about it a lot here, because there's the things that we do in the external world. And as you're speaking, I'm having this experience inside myself, right? I'm getting lit up. I'm getting excited. I'm being introduced to the way that your journey has created, the blessings of these teachings you bring us. And I'm curious, for you and for Leslie, that this inner body, this experience of embodiment, it's not welcome in all our circles. So how are we honoring it in our relationships?
I think just, I can't think of anything specific, but an example or a theme that shows up in my life is, because I'm highly empathic, I can feel a lot, and I can feel what a lot of people are feeling. So I've been gifted with the ability to be able to feel in my body what other people are feeling in their body. And it also shows up in thought forms, or it shows up in through messages. So if people message me things, I can feel it all. It's really fascinating. And that's why I was so overwhelmed as a kid. And I do think that part of my HSP is that I process really deeply. So if I feel or I perceive something in somebody else, I make it mean something. And then I process really deeply. That's one of the traits of sensory processing sensitivity, is depth of processing. we process with a lot of depth, we process with a lot of breadth, right? So we're able to take something in and we chew on it, we go really deep with it, and we take it to all crazy places. That's why a lot of HSPs are really, we're in our heads a lot. And I think I do that a lot with people, and I make things mean something that maybe they don't need to mean, or I take it to that next level. And then I find that creates distance between me and people. Right. So I have to really keep that in check. So what I've been doing a lot lately is a practice of commanding my energy back to my body, because as an empath, I'm more other centric, and I've been like that my whole life. I'm very much in the other energy fields and emotional bodies, and I have to bring my energy back to myself. And I think that's so important. And it's been a game changer for me, because for a lot of my life, I didn't know what was mine and what was other people's. There was a lot of enmeshment there. So I've kind of learned how to do that now, and I've mastered my empathy, and it's been important for my to be empowered, for sure.
Yeah, and I want challenging to. Yeah, sorry, I'm just very curious about this this work of taking your energy back and bringing your energy back. Like, what does that look like, and how are you doing that?
So yeah, it's fairly new. I would say in the last few months, I've really been mastering it. I think I've been kind of downloading this wisdom, and then now I'm really grasping it with my own, like, kind of my own psychology and understanding it, so then I can share it. But I've been, so before I go to bed, or when I wake up in the morning, or after I've done something intense, like some empathic healing work, I'll always command my energy back to my body. So I'll just say, I command my energy back to my body now. And what that does is it just retrieves your energy and pulls it back to your body. And then you can connect in with yourself, right? So I always say to people, before you do any sort of emotion regulation, or even looking at what am I feeling, what do I need, we have to be in our own energy, right? Because we need clarity of what's ours and what's theirs. So retrieve energy back. Then what am I feeling? Then what is the unmet need associated with this feeling? And then once we understand what the unmet need is, then we need to mitigate that. We need to find a way to get that need met. And that's really important. So all the work that I do, it always comes back to that. Needs. What are our needs, and how can we go about getting them met? Right. And many people are so terrified to get their needs met because it requires vulnerability. Because most of our unmet needs are attached to fears and insecurities, and nobody wants to tell anybody what their fears and insecurities are. So we go around life with so many unmet needs, and then we wonder why we're all in conflict and fighting with each other, because we aren't actually willing to be vulnerable and communicate what our needs are. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a really rich topic. Like, as you're speaking, I'm like, yes, let's hang out here. We can hang out here a while. And I'm so curious about, in your book, it's about like halfway through, you talk about, this feeling of the focal point of your experience was not your feelings when you were a counselor. And so it was more about, like you were saying, like understanding them, being more interested in them, learning from them. And so you could coach and be a counselor from there, but it made you develop these very codependent traits you describe of enmeshing into their experience and trying to solve it for them, but not opening to this deeper inner layer. And just to kind of pause us a little, that this takes a lot of space, right? And you talk about that in the book, that you need space around these energies to know that you need to retrieve them, to know that you need to collect yourself and understand your needs.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that you're not getting your value anymore from how someone approved how you counseled them or coached them. You're not getting your value from this conversation, or I wasn't getting my value from that interaction I had at work today.
Yeah. The spaciousness is so essential. And I bet you if I were to go back and read that book, there would be things I would want to adjust. because that was before I wrote that book throughout my embodiment process, and I wasn't able to heal my trauma until I had become fully embodied. So that who's sitting across from you now is a man that's worked and cleared out his trauma, his attachment trauma. And prior to, when I wrote that book, I hadn't. Right. So that book it's still, everything in it is still the wisdom I stand by, though, because we need to get present before we can embody. Right. If we have over-identification with mind, we can't embody. So we need to pull our attention away from our mind and into our body so we can become embodied, so we can activate the inner healer, so we can heal trauma. And in my personal opinion, everybody on this planet has trauma, because I don't categorize trauma as like you've been raped or like, so I should say only that you've been raped or that you've been to war or that you have PTSD, anything like that. I view trauma from a much wider lens, that there's attachment trauma, interpersonal trauma, physical trauma, like it all is encompassed in that. And I think every human being on this planet has some form of trauma. So we need to embody, and then we need to heal our trauma. And then we find that things just start to come together from that point. Yeah.
So would you add that piece then on trauma into your second edition? And
I'm going to write another book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Called The Pursuit of Worthiness. And I haven't started it yet. I'll probably start the outline sometime soon, but, and that's going to be about post that book, like where I'll basically just take off from there and I'll move towards, okay, my trauma healing journey, how I met worthiness when I became embodied. So it'll basically be a book about embodiment, but people don't really get that, right? They don't understand the word embodiment. So like pursuing worthiness, I think more people can relate to that. But it will be a book on how to become embodied and how to do the work of healing shame, trauma, and grief, the three culprits, in my opinion, that kind of rob us of our authenticity.
I think for me, I was really curious too about this idea, Matt, that you've mentioned with, I think you called it ownership, self-ownership,
yeah,
versus acceptance. And if that was sort of like the kind of integration you were talking about with the inner and outer world. I'm not sure if you can elaborate a little bit more, but for me, that was a term that I was really, it really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think because my background, my own personal healing journey required me to move through shame, being gay, being a sensitive man, like I internalized a lot of messages around femininity is bad, or somehow you shouldn't express these things. And obviously being gay and being sensitive are more attributed to feminine qualities. So essentially, I just lost my train of thought. What was the question you were curious about? Oh, self-ownership. Yeah, sorry about that. Self-acceptance for me felt like it needed another step. It wasn't enough for me to just take these things about myself and just be like, okay, fine, I'll take them in and I'll make them a part of who I am. Self-ownership was about, how can I really highlight these things? How can I unpack my conditioning around what it means to be feminine, what it means to be masculine, and really internalize these things and own them and start to lead with them. And that for me was when I learned the true meaning of, humility and dignity and vulnerability. I think these are really three really important things that I had to learn how to practice, and vulnerability probably being one of the most potent, because for me, that's how I was able to heal the shame wounding that I had around not being able to integrate these parts of myself. And that took like a lot of shadow work, right? A lot of really being with these parts of me that I was trained or conditioned to reject, and how to bring them back in. And to speak about the inner and outer body, I think my journey really taught me that I could only really mentally accept myself. And then when the ownership took over was when I started to embody, when I got into my body and I started to really, truly, I believe all of our experiences and and shadows and all that stuff, they live in our body in a cellular way. And when I was able to connect downward and get into my body, that's when I was able to have those deep cathartic releases where I was able to purge out all the stuff that I had been stuffing down. So it's like, I really had to connect with my body before I could heal. And for a lot of people, it's like, well, how on earth am I going to go from being where I'm at to just being in my inner body? But for me, it was like yin yoga. It was yoga nidra. It was these practices that allowed me to connect to my outer body first, just feeling into the sensations and the felt sense of like my emotions. And then once you kind of mastered that, then you realize, oh, there's another layer here. And that's that inner body where you start to connect to this. It's almost like this, for me, I experienced it as like a pool of like just spaciousness, like inside of me, where it was like, oh, like I could just breathe into myself, and I felt held by my own energy. And for me, that's when I had my first taste of true worthiness. At least in my adult life, because I think we come into this world, perfect, whole, and complete, full of worthiness, and then we unlearn worthiness. And I think one of the meanings of life, at least for me, is to remember my worthiness. And I was able to remember my worthiness by connecting to my body. Yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing up those outer body exercises, because you had so many great exercises at the back of your book.
Yeah.
That kind of, you really focus individuals that read it around, do an outer body experience, and then let's go into more of being the space. And I appreciated how Leslie highlighted ownership, because that's what you're inviting people into when you share so vulnerably, is here's an opportunity to empower yourself, own your experience, and do what's right for you. Because the name of your book is Be the Space. And so you're empowering an individual to decide to go into the deeper layers of their experience. And I wanted to highlight a connection between all three of us in the field. Both Leslie and I are parents of young boys, and your introduction around your relationship with your own mother. And both Leslie and I struggle that our young boys are highly sensitive individuals. And I don't want to make that claim for Leslie, but both of our boys they're very emotional, have extreme anxiety or tantrums or things that relate to what you describe in your introduction. And specifically that experience of going to school and having so much anxiety. And then, for multiple years, that it's not something that you learn how to create those attachments at school right away.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just honor your work here, number one, because I shared that with Leslie. And, if you wanted to share anything that after this book, because you wrote this a couple of years ago when you were traveling, have you had insights since then around that experience with your mother and working with your clients around, because you have a program around this as well, right?
That book I wrote before knowing I was highly sensitive. I had lived my whole life being HSP and having no freaking clue. And I've just found out I was HSP 2 years ago, and I literally changed my whole business direction because of it. Because for me, it was the missing piece. Like I had done all this work, and like for 15 years, just deep diving. And I always felt like something was missing. Like I just didn't understand a part of me. And then once I found out about the science of sensitivity and sensory processing sensitivity, it was a game changer. So it brought that piece of being so terrified of going to school for 2 years, like running back to my mom, crying, like I had major separation anxiety, because when I would go into school, I could feel everything. I was just this little sponge I was absorbing all these feelings from everybody else. And I had my own intense feelings and I couldn't handle it. So that integrated that piece for me. And I was able to really heal that piece, because I'm like, okay, now I get it. I get who I am. Really, because being sensitive, it's such a strong part of who we are. When we have that sensitivity, our nervous systems are just different. They're structured very different than we call them whatever neurotypical people, or if we're considered neurodivergent, then we're different. So we need to be mindful of our environments. We need to be mindful of these things. And I really think we're going to start to see a lot more of this. I think evolutionarily, you look at the direction the planet is heading, I think we need more sensitive people on this planet. We need more empathy. So I do think that we're going to see a lot of more sensory processing sensitivity, more empathy, more of these sorts of temperament traits starting to kind of come up. And I already see it in younger generations. Like I see kids and I'm just like, I can feel them, like they're already coming into this world conscious and they're already awake. It's just so beautiful. So yeah, it makes me happy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your work. It is beautiful. And I consider it a gift, even though it's been a very big challenge for me personally in helping and dealing with my son's anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really appreciate is that it's really made me focus on validating and acknowledging all of those emotions, those things that, you know, we were taught maybe a long time ago to bottle up and keep inside of us. But I really, you know, grateful because it's really making me honor all of that. And it's so important, which is why your work is so important as well, too. Like we do need people to be able to feel their feelings and express them, you know.
Yeah. That makes me smile so much because I'm like, oh, you know, like right now I'm building infrastructure that is offering sensitives what I wish I had when I was younger, right? And it's healing for me too to be able to offer this because there's almost like a transference that happens. But knowing that there's parents out there that are accommodating their children's sensitivity, it just makes me feel so happy because I know that it's the difference between attachment trauma or no attachment trauma. And you look at what attachment trauma does to us, it divides us from people. It makes us fearful of social interaction. It makes our relationships strained. So just if we can really honor somebody's experience, it's a difference between having a happy life and not really. So
yeah, totally. And some of the you know, the exercises, I guess, it's such a embodied and somatic, you know, practice that we work on to help with some of that anxiety. And you know, I think it's just such a beautiful thing. And some of these things that we've never, like, we're just learning now as tools to have. So it's wonderful that you're, you know, bringing that to more people.
Yeah. So could you tell us about the program you offer for HSPs, as we'll call them, highly sensitive people?
Yeah. Okay. So the part of my journey was I met a psychologist named Dr. Chris Horan, and we did some work together. He's in Australia. He's in Melbourne. And he's the one that told me to come to Authentic Relating. And that's how I met you, Kat. Right. And so I learned about HSP and ART from him. And then both of those experiences, I was like, wow, like this is just life-changing for me. So I developed with Chris, we co-founded this program together called Authentic Relating and Empowerment for Highly Sensitive People. So what we do is we've taken Authentic Relating and we've taken empowerment, which we both frame as emotion regulation, because when you are emotionally regulated, you're more empowered and you're not overtaken by your emotions. So we basically merge these two concepts over an 8-week course. And we teach trauma healing, we teach emotion regulation, we teach how to unpack your social conditioning, we teach about the trait, and then we teach three kind of areas of authentic relating, which is being present, listening skills, and self-expression. And what we find is that when people start to learn, especially sensitives, when they start to learn those 3 principles of authentic relating, it's just a total game changer. Because a lot of us aren't present with ourselves because we're dissociated from trauma, or things are so intense for us. So we spend a lot of our times in our minds. And then when we learn how to listen, our relationships improve. And then when we learn how to express our needs, our relationships improve. So the course is really all about how to build a strong relationship with yourself so you can have a strong relationship with others. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I will say this, major healing took place for me when I learned about my trait and I was able to start to connect with other HSPs. because for most of my life, I felt like an alien living on this planet. I was like, nobody's like me. I'm weird. People don't really get me. I'll like crack jokes. People are like, right. But then as soon as I'm around other HSPs, I'm like, suddenly my jokes are funny, right? Like they get me. And I was like, to feel gotten and to feel understood. I just think that that's like, wow, like I'm not weird. I'm not normal, or I'm not, I am normal. And it's just like, it's really beautiful. So I appreciate you sharing that story, because that happens to so many neurodivergent people. We feel like there's something wrong with us, and then we internalize shame, right? Which that's why that's probably the number one thing I work with in my business is shame, because we've all internalized that there's something wrong with us. Yeah.
Right.
And there isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's like a co-regulation? It's like we're co-regulating because we understand each other and we can integrate what's happening to ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of people who are HSP and empaths, those are the two types of people I work with predominantly, is we speak more in energy than we do from the words in our mouth. Like, right. Like we're very much energetic beings. We're connected to that kind of more deeper aspect of our nature. And I just think that it's resonance. Right. And then when you're around the other people like that, it just feels like, it's almost like a lot of people in my courses describe it, that it's like just feeling like a feeling of being at home. Like you're just come home and you just feel good, Yeah.
Totally coming home. And I think you said that a few times in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm actually really curious if you use the term like toxic masculinity at all, and if that's something that resonates with you in how you describe your work.
I'm not a huge fan of that word, the toxic masculinity, because I don't like attributing a negative word to something that is so beautiful. Like masculinity is amazing. What I prefer to use is performative or hyper masculinity, because performative masculinity is all about, it's other centric, it's ego centric. It's about how are other people going to perceive my masculinity. So I need to perform in the ways that I've been taught that masculinity is acceptable. And then hyper masculinity is similar, but it's just, it's trying to be more masculine than you are, right? And denying, if something's hyper, it means we're denying something else. So we're denying our feminine, right? And I would love to see there be more of a balance between the matriarchy and the patriarchy on this planet. And I think that's one of my missions on this planet is to do this work and help create balance between these two gender energies. And so yeah, lots of good stuff coming up in that area.
Same here. I highly resonate. I'm just like, you're like speaking my language.
Yeah.
Wow. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And you also have a podcast yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You run a podcast. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I want to have you guys on there now, because it's such a good fit. And I feel like this conversation needs to continue, because there's lots of stuff here. I feel like you guys are for surely my people. So it's called Inspired to be Authentic. So it's basically a podcast where I interview people who are living their most authentic lives. We get real and we talk about how they live with courage to align to themselves and their purpose. That's kind of my tagline for the podcast. So yeah, just, and the universe just kind of aligns me to people. I don't do it weekly. Like whenever somebody comes into my sphere and I feel like there's a ton of alignment, I'll do a podcast with them. And it's just an opportunity for people to feel the resonance of people who are living from a place of empowerment and authenticity. I think that's the biggest thing. So the topics are so wide ranging. Like, yeah, it's really, really cool, because I love meeting people and absorbing positive vibes from people as well. So
yeah. Thank you. I'd be honored to be on your podcast. I'd love to do it.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, totally. And I love that your topics are wide ranging. Ours are kind of all over as well too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in this theme of how do we embody the future that we want to create?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you could spend this time with us and share a little bit about your book and how it has evolved and changed you, and how you've seen the contrast of your journey and your seedlings of this new book because of all that you've learned since then, and that we've known each other in that time. Like how I've seen how much you've, really embodied and been courageous in healing that trauma. So I just really admire you as a dear friend and, a comrade in this work. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.